Welcome, one and all, to the High Pressure Podcast. My name is Jeff Beamish, air quality meteorologist at Sonoma Technology here in the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area. As always, I am joined by my air quality forecasting posse. Yeah, we're a posse now. Patrick Zahn, lead air quality forecaster. Steve Irwin, air quality forecaster. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Hi, Jeff.
Gentlemen, we are tracking some major smoke impacts across portions of the United States. This is satellite imagery, the late afternoon hours of May 18th, 2023. We are tracking a low pressure center that's diving from southern Manitoba into portions of North Dakota and Minnesota. But we're not really focused so much on that. More so all of this haze you see from Idaho and Montana stretching into the northern portion of the United States, Minnesota, into the Ohio Valley and the northeastern portion of the United States. That haze that you're seeing here on this satellite loop is smoke, a lot of smoke, and it's dinging air quality index values across the country. This is the latest fire and smoke map as we approach the 4 o'clock hour here on May 18th. And we are tracking air quality index values for PM 2.5 or fine particles in the unhealthy for sensitive groups category. This would be all the dots and squares in orange, to the unhealthy AQI category in red, and even the very unhealthy AQI category in Nebraska and hazardous AQI category. This is a purple air monitor here, this square, a low-cost sensor tracking hazardous air quality near the Nebraska and Colorado border here late on this Thursday afternoon. So where is all this smoke coming from? We're going to discuss that in the High Pressure Podcast here and talk about where the smoke is heading for the upcoming weekend, as we are tracking some potential smoke impacts for our friends in northeastern Ohio, the Mahoning Valley, Youngstown-Warren area, as well as Louisiana. But before we get to where the smoke is heading, let's talk about where all this smoke is coming from. And as you can see from the fire and smoke map, you can definitely tell that air quality index values up in Canada, not great here this afternoon. British Columbia into Alberta, even Saskatchewan. A ton of fires right now across portions of Canada here in mid-May. As of the 18th of May, 92 active wildfires burning in Alberta. To their west in British Columbia, 63 active fires at this point. And in Saskatchewan, 25 active fires. And the one thing I want to point out here, though, is the amount of fires that they have seen in Saskatchewan this year versus the typical number of the typical number of wildfires that they see here in mid-May. So far in 2023 in Saskatchewan, 169 fires have been reported, well above the 5-year average. Typically by this point in the year in mid-May, they only see in Saskatchewan about 87 fires. So it has been very, very active on the wildfire front, not only in Saskatchewan, but for other portions of Canada as well. All right, so why are we seeing this abundance in wildfires for British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan? I want to show you the typical upper level weather pattern. This would be at 500 millibars or 18,000 feet up in the atmosphere. This is a typical pattern that we see for the first half of May. Some ridging across portions of British Columbia and Alberta, typically a west to east flow across portions of Canada and the northern portion of the United States. That has totally changed, though, here for the first half of May 2023. A very amplified, well-defined ridge of upper-level high pressure that's sitting over Western Canada and the northern portion of the United States, with the upper-level wind pattern generally northwesterly from the western portion of Canada, drifting toward the upper Midwest and into the Great Lakes as well. And just how strong is this area of high pressure? This is an anomaly plot for 500 millibar heights, and you can see a very anomalously strong area of high pressure that's been sitting over Canada here for the first half of May 2023. So why does upper level high pressure matter? Well, upper level high pressure, it compresses the atmosphere, and when you compress a column of air, it does a couple of things. Number one, it starts to heat up. Number two, it starts to dry out. And third, that sinking motion that's associated with upper level high pressure that we've been seeing over portions of Canada here for the first part of May 2023. Well, that sinking air really goes against any type of cloud development. So it's been sunny, it's been hot, it's been very dry, and it's really made for a tinderbox across Canada. Just how hot has it been across Canada here? Well, let's just take a look at the last couple of days here. This is the temperature anomalies across portions of Canada and the northern portion of the United States. But I really want to point out here between Friday and Monday, this region right here. This would be northern British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. And in these areas, we have seen temperatures that have been running about 20 to 35 degrees above average for this time of year between Friday the 12th and Monday the 15th. Now, for those of you watching or listening in Canada, I know you don't deal with Fahrenheit, you deal with Celsius. Basically, the temperatures have been running in these regions about 10 to 20 degrees Celsius above average for this time of year. So certainly the temperatures and the upper level weather pattern has not been kind to Canada, nor have the preceding conditions when it comes to the drought. The latest drought monitor across Canada is showing moderate drought in this beige color here and severe drought across portions of British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. So very dry vegetation in these spots. Couple that with the upper level weather pattern, the very hot temperatures, the very dry conditions, no cloud cover, and it's all been tailor-made for rapid wildfire development. And that's why we have seen so many rapid wildfires, rapidly growing wildfires, that is, over portions of British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. So that's sort of the table setter here for the smoke impacts across the lower 48 in the United States. So we're going to talk now more about where this smoke is heading. And for that, I'm going to kick it over to Steve.
Thank you, Jeff. Before we look at where the smoke is going, as forecasters, it's always a good idea to figure out where the smoke is currently. And part of that is figuring out where it is in the atmosphere vertically from the surface up to aloft. And so one of the places that we like to start out with is that satellite image that you were showing earlier, where we can see the smoke stretching from Western Canada across the north central US and across the eastern part of the country as well. And so at first glance, if we're looking at the smoke, it's tempting to think, well, we probably have high PM 2.5 concentrations all the way from Western Canada into the Great Lakes. But then as we look at the meteorology on top of this image, we can start to get some more information. And so what we have up here on top of the satellite are the 500 millibar heights. There is vorticity, low pressure and high pressure systems. And that's going to tell us something about if the smoke is possibly coming to the surface or whether it's possibly staying aloft. And so as we look over the eastern part of the country, we see southerly winds, we see a ridge aloft, but I don't see a lot of dynamics to force the smoke downward. In fact, when we have warm air coming up from the south like that, that's often a process that lifts the air upward into the atmosphere. And so maybe not as high of concentrations there. As we go back to the northwest, however, we can see a line of very tall cumulus clouds coming from northwestern Wisconsin all the way back into central Kansas. And that delineates a cold front at the surface that has formed ahead of that low pressure system that we can see in the aloft imagery. Now, what we know about cold fronts, cold air sinks, and so we often have sinking air right behind that cold front at the surface, as you had discussed earlier with high pressure aloft. And then now this low pressure center coming through the upper Midwest, that cold front is actually helping to draw the smoke down toward the surface. And so we can start to get an idea just by the smoke and the upper level weather pattern where we might want to focus our attention for the air quality forecasts on this day.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And just to really hammer home that point about trying to get a handle on where in the atmosphere the smoke is, at what level, I wanted to show a visible satellite image from yesterday. And this image pretty clearly shows a huge area of smoke across the Great Lakes region and even a band extending to the south. So you might look at this visible satellite imagery and think, oh yeah, the whole area is just covered with smoke. It's going to be bad air quality. But then if we just drop on the hourly PM concentrations, we can see it's green over most of that area. If I zoom in a bit, you can start to see the concentrations looking at single digits, micrograms per meter cubed of PM 2.5. So it was actually good air quality at this time yesterday, even though the area was covered by smoke. That smoke was mostly aloft. And just wanted to emphasize that this particular aspect of smoke forecasting presents a real challenge to forecasters and for the models that they use. Getting a handle on where the smoke is vertically in the atmosphere and whether it's going to reach the surface and what direction it's going to be transported at different levels in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and Patrick, that pattern continues into today, May 18th, as we look at the fire and smoke map from Air Now. We can see pretty much that same area covered by smoke aloft, but over the eastern part of the country, AQI levels are still running mostly in the good category. There may be an orange sunset in that portion of the country this evening due to all the smoke in the upper portions of the atmosphere, but air quality levels still good there. It's really when we get back behind that cold front across Minnesota and the Dakotas back into Montana where we see the unhealthy AQI levels, where the cold front is helping draw that smoke down to the surface. Now, another challenge we have, so we have the challenge of where is the smoke vertically in the atmosphere. We also have the challenge of areas with really minimal coverage of air quality sensors. And so if we look off to the north here in Canada, we see pretty large regions, forested regions, which, not surprisingly, don't have air quality sensors for us to look at and see how concentrated the smoke is upwind in places such as Ontario. And so another tool that we can use to diagnose how bad the concentrations are is to look at the visibility plots. And so this is from the National Weather Service, the Aviation Weather Center, and they have a product where we can look and see the observations of visibility at the surface. And so in Minnesota, this corresponds very nicely with the air quality readings that we've seen, where we have visibilities down to 2.5 miles in haze. And so that matches up pretty well. But then we can come up north here and see, well, is there that intensity of smoke also off to the north? And what we see is it's really not there. When we get further north, we have visibility, a little bit lower visibility here in fog, but generally 10 to 15 miles. So much cleaner air, much clearer air off to the north. And that gives us additional information about what the air is like that's coming into the US as we head into this weekend.
Steve, really quick, go back down to Minnesota on this plot here, because it really shows a well-defined cold front as well that basically is bisecting the eastern portion of Minnesota. By the way, shout out to KSTC. That's the St. Cloud Regional Airport. As a St. Cloud State alum, go Huskies. Onward.
Yes, Jeff. So yeah, the visibility readings really help us out and give us more information to work with as we're looking at where this smoke is heading into the upcoming weekend here. Also, as we're looking at all those weather readings, the air quality readings, that helps us analyze which air quality models are performing best, and then we can use those as we're looking ahead. But before we get to the air quality models, I just wanted to show the meteorological models that will give an idea of where this cold front is heading over the next several days. And so generally, we can see in a wind pattern across a cold front, the winds will shift from northwesterly to westerly and then southeasterly. We can also see it in this trough of low pressure here, which lines up pretty well with that line of clouds that we were seeing on satellite imagery. And so that's definitely something we want to track. Also looking up to the northwest here, where there are still high concentrations of smoke, we have a high pressure system, which is very important because that not only leads to areas of calm winds, it's also showing where the air is sinking and concentrating smoke at the surface. So those are two pieces we'll really want to pay attention to over the next several days as we run through these predictions. And so right now I just have the European weather model pulled up, and we're looking at surface winds and pressures, and then going to move ahead here. So as we get into this evening on May the 18th, we can see the cold front progressing southeastward through Wisconsin, at the tail end of it down through Missouri and Kansas City. That continues to progress on Friday, moving off toward places like Oklahoma City by midday Friday into St. Louis midday Friday. Still off to the northwest of our Youngstown-Warren forecasting client on Friday. So we would still expect fairly good air quality there ahead of the front. Then as we get into the latter part of Friday, we can see that cold front start to transition into northwestern Ohio, the southern edge starting to move toward northern Louisiana. We also have the surface high pressure system that I mentioned coming into the western plains, into the Rockies, also likely helping to concentrate that smoke. And it's really here on Saturday that we're most concerned about for Youngstown-Warren, and also down to the south in Louisiana. As that cold front finally pushes through the region, we know the smoke is concentrated most behind that front, so we would expect AQI levels to start increasing as we head into Saturday. So I'm going to throw it over to Patrick. He can give us a look at how the air quality models are predicting AQI levels change as this front passes this weekend.
Thanks, Steve. So I do want to show some output from air quality models that we use when we are making forecasts for the Youngstown-Warren region, and specifically models that predict impacts from wildfire smoke. One that we lean heavily on is the firework model from Canada. And this model is showing in its latest run really significant impacts from wildfire smoke in the western portion of Canada and across north-central US. You can see concentrations here in excess of 100 micrograms per meter cubed for PM2.5 hourly concentrations. So I do want to step this model forward just to give us an idea of what the model is predicting for Northeast Ohio beginning on May 18th. As I step it forward, you can see initially here there's a little bit of transport from lingering smoke late in the evening on May 18th in the ballpark of 2 to 5 micrograms, so not really significant. But I really want to focus on this band of PM2.5 that you see moving across the Midwest. Now that is right behind the cold front that Steve was talking about. There's wildfire smoke locked in right behind that front. And as we move it forward, you can see that that band of smoke really makes its impact into Northeast Ohio early in the morning on May 20th. That's Saturday. So we are expecting smoke impacts on the morning of May 20th in the Youngstown-Warren region. Now the concentrations will probably be in the ballpark of 10 to 20 micrograms for the hourly concentrations. It might be a little bit higher for individual hours. And then by the afternoon of the 20th, we can see that band of smoke move off to the southeast. And later in that day and early into the next day, the 21st, we can see that same band of smoke actually move southward and impact northern Louisiana. That's another one of our forecast clients. So we are keeping an eye on smoke transport from these fires for multiple clients across the US. Jeff.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, and I think one thing that would be good to highlight here is the air quality forecast for the Mahoning Valley as we are heading into the weekend. Discussing here with the model, great to get a picture of the progression of that smoke plume. But yeah, the official air quality forecast for Saturday in the Mahoning Valley is calling for moderate AQI values for PM 2.5. With the peak of that smoke initially looking to be Saturday morning and afternoon, with some slightly cleaner air moving in heading into Saturday night and possibly Sunday. On Sunday, the winds are still coming out of the north behind this cold front that's passing through, and we can't rule out some very thin density smoke on Sunday into northeastern Ohio, but right now we don't think that smoke is going to be as thick as what we'll see on Saturday. So the weekend forecast for PM 2.5 in the Mahoning Valley, moderate AQI on Saturday, and then high good AQI values on Sunday for the Youngstown-Warren region.
Thanks, Jeff. And one major caveat when we're looking at these predictions of wildfire smoke is that they assume that the fire behavior will remain constant in time, that there won't be additional fire growth or new fires that start sometime between now and, say, the 20th or 21st. So any significant fire growth or new fires will contribute to additional smoke beyond what the model is showing here. So I'm going to compare the output from the model that I just showed to this one. I'm showing NOAA's NAQFC model, another model that incorporates wildfire smoke into its PM 2.5 predictions. What I'm showing here is the prediction for early Saturday morning. It's actually midnight at the beginning of Saturday, May 20th. And you can see from this prediction, a very clean area stretching through Ohio here. That's associated with the cold front that Steve was talking about. But immediately behind that front, you see an area of very elevated PM 2.5 concentrations. And as I step it forward, you can see that plume moving right into northeast Ohio. So the concentrations predicted here, it's showing, this map is great because it shows the local hourly concentrations predicted by the model, 12 to 18 micrograms for this time. So that matches fairly well with the Canadian firework model. Another thing worth mentioning is that the timing is a little bit different, just by a couple of hours, I believe. This one has the plume making it into northeast Ohio a little bit earlier, but there's pretty good agreement in the timing and the concentration of this smoke plume. And that's something that we really focus on as forecasters when we're getting information from different models that we're trying to understand how much uncertainty there is. If two different models are agreeing, that improves the certainty of our forecast. We can say with greater confidence to the agency, hey, we think concentrations are going to be about in this range. And in this case, like you said, Jeff, it was in the moderate AQI category in the official forecast. So I do want to continue stepping this model forward so we can see what happens to this smoke plume as it eventually impacts Louisiana, but I'm right at the end, I believe, of the forecast period. So now we're looking at the morning or midday on Sunday, and the plume is just impacting northern Louisiana. So we do expect some impacts on Sunday afternoon in Louisiana. We expect PM levels to probably be elevated into the moderate range, but this is something that we're going to be tracking closely, especially as we're looking at a forecast now that is 4 days out. A lot of things can change in 4 days.
Thanks, Patrick, for the great overview heading into the weekend for northeastern Ohio and for Louisiana as well. What we're taking a look at right now is the National Hazard Map from the National Weather Service, which brings us to our next topic here on the podcast, the other inherited challenge when it comes to smoke forecasting, and that being the difficulties in communicating smoke forecasts for portions of the country. Again, this is the hazard map from the National Weather Service. Notice the areas in gray: Montana, Nebraska, Minnesota, western, southern Wisconsin. The gray areas here are air quality alerts that have been issued from air quality agencies that were sent to the National Weather Service, highlighting the dangers of the smoke that will be impacting these regions here in the coming days. So you're probably looking at this map and you're seeing air quality alerts for Minnesota and Wisconsin, but none issued for the Dakotas or into Wyoming or maybe other portions of the country. And that's because air quality forecasting doesn't have the same uniformity as it has with, say, typical weather forecasting. If you're forecasting thunderstorms or sunshine or wind events, that all goes through the National Weather Service. It's a very uniform process, and there are forecast offices across the country. The same can't be said for air quality forecasting for a variety of reasons. Patrick, bringing you into the conversations, one of those challenges for air quality forecasts is just having the resource to be able to forecast for a specific area.
That's right, Jeff. So not every region has the resources to make an air quality forecast every day or to issue alerts. And they don't always coordinate with the National Weather Service. But there are a couple of other elements that contribute to some inconsistencies sometimes. Even if an agency or an entire state does submit air quality forecasts to AirNow, they might not have an action day program or an alert program for wildfire smoke or for ozone or PM 2.5. They might not have that set up. In addition to that, different agencies have different criteria for issuing alerts. They might issue them at different AQI levels. So that's up to the agency at what level they issue an air quality alert and whether they issue alerts at all. And we have just started coordinating with the Weather Service with some of our clients who didn't previously send their air quality alerts to the Weather Service. So they are trying to achieve some uniformity, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
And we're really appreciative of the partnership that we have with the National Weather Service for our select forecast clients when we do issue air quality alerts, whether it be for ozone or PM10 or PM 2.5. It really is a partnership between the agency and the National Weather Service in having an open dialogue about, okay, what's the protocol for an air quality alert? How am I going to issue this air quality alert? How are you getting it? How long is it going to be in effect for? Really, it's best to over communicate with them because then that means that the public is getting the best and accurate information out there to make an informed decision on whether they should take a walk or perhaps go for a bike ride.
So, Jeff, one other thing that I wanted to follow up on when you mentioned resources is that not every air quality agency has the resources to make a daily air quality forecast or to issue alerts. So one thing that we help with at Sonoma Technology is providing forecaster training. They might not have a meteorologist on their team. They might not be able to contract it out, but we can provide some basic meteorological training so that they can start to issue forecasts. And that is one of the things that we provide at Sonoma Technology.
Steve, one thing I want to bring you in on is your past experience. You worked at a state agency issuing forecasts and also attempted to kind of bridge that gap in discontinuity between an air quality alert issued for one state, another state not having anything. And it's not that these states that don't have the resources or don't have an air quality alert issue, it's not a matter of not wanting to do it. Want to make that abundantly clear. I'm sure every state would love to do it. It just comes down to resources. And Steve, you have some experience, though, in bridging that gap between states that have the resources and the other states that may be lacking in that department.
Yeah, we were one of those states that had the resources, and we did reach out to surrounding states, especially during these wildfire events when we could see air quality impacts are broad. It's impacting a large range of geography, many states at the same time. And then you would look at the map and there'd be these holes in where air quality alerts were being issued. And so, yeah, we would talk to those agencies, and a lot of times they had a great desire to communicate the potential health effects from that smoke moving across their state, but they just didn't have the systems, the resources, the funding in place to make that happen. So yeah, I think there is a lot of desire, especially with as the climate is trending in this direction and we're seeing these widespread smoke events so often affecting such a large portion of the country. Many states want to get into the game, and it's just a matter of finding the tools and the resources to get that done.
But the common denominator out of all of this here, resources or not, the common denominator that all 50 states have is the EPA and airnow.gov, where folks, wherever you live across the country, whether you get a forecast or not, you can go on to airnow.gov and get a sense of the air quality index values in your neighborhood or across your region, whether it be the interactive map on airnow.gov or the fire and smoke map that we showed you, which is fire.airnow.gov. Two great resources to check the air quality in your city, whether your state agency or your local agency is issuing a forecast or not. Well, that does it for the latest edition of the High Pressure Podcast. If you want to see more of the forecasting work we do here at Sonoma Technology, you can head to our website. It's www.sonomatech.com. Maybe you missed the High Pressure Podcast we've done in the past, when we have a slew of them and a lot of places that you can catch them. You can head to our YouTube channel, the High Pressure Podcast playlist. That's at youtube.com/Sonoma Technology. For the audio versions of the High Pressure Podcast, you can head to Apple Podcasts, or you can find us on Amazon Alexa or on Spotify. I'm Jeff Beamish.
I'm Patrick Zahn.
And I'm Steve Irwin.
Thanks for listening to and watching the High Pressure Podcast.